Hello and welcome to Curtains and Lights, a podcast where we discuss movies directly after watching them. Here's Alex.
And here's Jannik.
And today we'll be making a special episode because today is May the 4th, and May the 4th be with you, dear viewer, about Star Wars Episode 4, a 1977 movie directed by George Lucas. And there will be spoilers from here on out, but we assume you've seen Star Wars, like, really. So, welcome back. We assume you've seen the movie, but we're gonna quickly recap it anyways. So, Star Wars Episode 4, or Star Wars A New Hope, is about Luke Skywalker, a boy from Tatooine, who's not really had any experiences with outer space before, getting caught in the events of a battle ongoing above the planet's surface. So, above Tatooine.
And this battle is between the Rebel Alliance and the Empire, who are space Nazis. And so basically, the droids that have the plans to
The Death Star.
to the Death Star are shut down over his. Ich habe keine Ahnung, warum ich so verkacke gerade. Alter.
Das kriegt aber auch gerade nicht besser hin.
Alter, das ist halt super fucking dumm irgendwie. Weil wenn man es so erklärt, braucht man dafür 10 Minuten. Und ich will halt nicht 10 Minuten damit verbringen, Star Wars zu erklären. Was ist denn so ein gutes Concise? Man kann ja einfach sagen, es geht um einen Typen namens Luke Skywalker, der einfach involviert wird in einen intergalaktischen Krieg. Und dann kann man anfangen mit praktisch der Thematikanalyse, weil man muss jetzt nicht sagen, der Plan vom Death Star und so weiter und so fort, ne?
Ja.
Okay. So welcome back to the podcast. Star Wars 4, the episode. Okay. So welcome back to the podcast. Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, is about Luke Skywalker, a farm boy who gets caught up in an intergalactic battle between the Rebel Alliance and the intergalactic empire. So obviously the story structure is fairly simple. It's like a very traditionally like Western story structure of like the hero's journey. Are you familiar with that term?
No, I'm not. You mind explaining it?
So the hero's journey is like a structure that is like very prevalent throughout history between different stories that like are about like adventure stories, right? So usually there's the hero of the story in his normal environment, and he or she is unsatisfied with that normal environment, but then there's an inciting incident, and he gets caught up in some like plot, and then there's usually a mentor figure. Then throughout the second act there's like a low point, and then at the end there's like in the third act there's the resolution where the hero proves himself to have learned by the mentor's rules. So like in this story, Luke Skywalker is the hero, obviously. The villain is Darth Vader. The mentor is Obi-Wan. And the other characters are more like supportive, like ally characters. And this is like pretty interesting because like the hero's journey is like a very traditional structure. Like there's like countless other movies and books, like even going back to ancient times, that always like use a repeated use of the structure, which like a lot of people like assume it's like not a very experimental or like challenging way to tell a story, but like a very simple but effective way of telling a story, right? Like you're not breaking new ground by telling a story like this. Like it's not some avant-garde experimental story structure, but
it's Star Wars. It's like
exactly. But this is like the historic like typical story structure that like just has like stood the test of time and like
Yeah, I mean, like Star Wars in a way, the Star Wars story with the acts you just explained is kind of very typical in a way. Like not of Star Wars, but like movies in general. And I kind of think it's like a classical like theater piece, but in space. It's a space opera. That's probably why it's that way. Like it's very theatralic, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, you see this kind of story in like Lord of the Rings, obviously, in in like really old pieces like what's it called, the Odyssey, um,
Mhm.
and there's actually like a book that is called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. It's a book. It's like a nonfiction book that like analyzes like different stories throughout history and like throughout different cultures. Because like we talk about that, this is a very typical story structure in the West, but even outside the West, there have been a lot of like stories that use this structure. And so I haven't read the book personally, but the book like sort of like analyzes this kind of hero's journey story structure and like compares like the different like variants on them. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so Star Wars is like a classic example of that, and Star Wars actually like uses like lends its like specific story, but especially like the first Star Wars movie, which we're talking about today, from an older Japanese movie called The Hidden Fortress.
Hmm.
So obviously, like the setting is very different because in The Hidden Fortress, it's you know in feudal Japan, it's with samurai instead of Jedi, and and
Yeah.
you know the Death Star isn't a Death Star but a fortress.
Hmm.
But like the main story beats are like I wouldn't say copied. I would more say like inspired because like obviously you could just say, oh well, the story is copied, but obviously
Yeah,
there's
no.
like a lot of thought put into it because it's not like one to one the same story. It like uses like the main like story beats of the same story, but like transported into like a completely
In
different
a different
context.
setting, in a completely
Exactly.
different context and completely different setting. Yeah, I
And
would
that's
say this is another example to reference another one of the podcasts we did about Sita Sings the Blues, where we talked about copyright. And this is basically an excellent example of where not a copy, but where derivative work definitely is is a work of art, you know?
right. And it's not just of, you know, it doesn't just derive from, you know, the hero's journey and from the Hidden Fortress, but like it's basically like we said in the Sita Sings the Blues episode, like a collage of like many different things. For example, a lot of the aesthetic is inspired um, by like 1930s serials. So like a serial is basically like a short film that plays like before a movie. Um, like this doesn't really happen like these days. Like nowadays, it's before you see a movie, you just see like trailers
I know what you mean.
and
Like
advertisements, right? But for example, if you go to Pixar movies, they still have like these short films that play in front, like before the movie starts. And this used to be like the norm, especially
what
with
do you
like
mean, like with the Pixar movie? Do you mean like kind of like logos in a way, or what do you mean?
no, not the logo. There's like actual like short film, like 5 to 10 minute films that like have like a completely independent story, like but that are just that like play in front of a film.
So
Like
basically, like a cold open from, for example, The Office, but over.
yeah, but like with completely like different characters. Like it usually doesn't. It usually is like in the same genre as like the main film, right?
Mhm.
But like it doesn't really have to do concretely with the main film. And this wasn't like a norm for like I don't know like prestigious movies, right? But this
Mhm.
was like a norm for you know
Every movie.
like you know like casual like science fiction movies of the 30s.
Mhm.
They often had like short episodes of like serials, and like one of those shows that actually had like multiple episodes throughout like different movies was Flash Gordon,
Mhm.
and Star Wars like borrows a lot of like the aesthetic like from Flash Gordon, like not really like the specific like images like the Death Star or like the clothing they wear, but more like the general like feel. Like if you like look at the Flash Gordon serials, obviously they're like black and white and lower quality than Star Wars, but from like this, it's like the same type of aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, for example, a character like Han Solo is like borrowed from like westerns as like the typical like bounty hunter cowboy archetype that like is like kind of an outlaw, but like not like bad, but like an anti-hero, you know, and that so that is also borrowed from like a whole other genre, the western, but like the western has also borrowed like a lot from like these Japanese samurai movies, and these Japanese samurai movies also borrowed a lot from like the western. So like it's really interesting because it's like not like just this was inspired by this and this, but this was inspired by like different things that were also like inspired by each other, and like it goes back, like it's infinitely regressive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I mean, like
really
Han Solo
interesting.
is also like in a way, like you could see like the different characters. Like there's the moral good one, that's Luke, because he has like the good goals, and then there's like the one who's fighting in his own interests, but these interests happen to line up with our interests. That would be, for example, be Han Solo. And in
Yeah,
episode 5, like the guy that also acts in his own interests but is against the interests of the viewer, for example, would be Boba Fett
right, but
or Jabba the Hutt, for example.
Lando is also like an like has his own interests, but aligns himself with the viewer. Then, you know,
Yeah.
and um, so I would like describe that as like Luke is like the idealistic hero, and Han is sort of the opportunistic hero, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and another thing that I really like about the aesthetic, and you mentioned this before, that especially like with the original trilogy, and I feel like especially with the first one, there's like a very like the aesthetics isn't really like futuristic for us, but rather like of a 70s, like 1970s version of like what the future would look like, you know?
Yeah, like the same general concept of future, but instead of like high-tech LCD screens, they have like tubes, like still electron tubes, like stuff like this. Or instead of like touch screen, they have like rather bulky buttons, but like lots of them,
Yeah,
you know? I think we
exactly.
could yeah? Sorry?
Yeah, exactly. I think this is, in my opinion, probably like the of these kind of like retrofuturistic movie, maybe like the second or third best. I think actually 2001 is also really good. So like
Well, but
2000,
like Star Wars has like quite an element of fantasy to it, like
yeah, yeah, right. So it's like even more genres. So it's like it's not really like just like a very like it's very far from like hard sci-fi, right? It
yeah,
has
like Star
elements
Trek. I
of,
would say Star Trek, which we oh my god, which we've also watched on this channel. I would say that's like hard sci-fi. Well, this is more like of a like I would say the general team is like a sci-fi theme, but that
right,
has like fans like fantasy characteristics to it. Like I would say the general
fantasy and
team is sci-fi.
western, and also like Second World War aesthetics. Which we can get into now if you want.
Yeah, that
Like
would be great. Like, of course, the Galactic Republic or the Galactic Empire is obviously based upon the Nazis, with the Galactic Republic being the Weimarer Republik and the
yeah,
Galactic Empire obviously being the Deutsches Reich. So, yeah.
exactly, and you know the rebels are like resistance groups, which is really cool because like most I know this is not like strictly a World War II movie because obviously it's not like set in World War II, right? But like aesthetically and like politically similar, and like most American World War II movies focus like extremely like strongly on the American army, right? And way less on like local resistance groups of like the people who lived there who like actively fought the Nazis, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like Star Wars, in a very like abstract sense, but still in a sense, is like sort of an homage to like resistance fighters, like more than like it's not like an outside like super like strongly built army that defeats the empire, or they don't defeat the empire, but they weaken the empire in this movie. It's like just local people who like joined the struggle and you
Yeah, it's
know.
like a grassroots revolution kind of thing.
Yeah, and obviously they have like help. Like for example, like Leia is like not really grassroots because she's a princess of Alderaan.
Yeah.
But like you see, like most of the rebels, like in the shots of like the rebel base, they are not like they're not supposed to represent like a status military, but more of like a voluntary like resistance militia.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of like I think a really fitting comparison in these times for Star Wars would probably be the internationalist commune of Rojava in comparison with like the Syrian state and especially like the ISIS. I would say that's
Right.
like a fair comparison because like I would like Rojava is like
Obviously,
a grassroots
aesthetically
movement,
very
right?
different. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Obviously, like aesthetically very different. Like aesthetically, this is way closer to World War II.
Hmm.
But like politically, there are certainly like parallels.
Yeah, exactly. And there's like it's also like a different thing I would say between like Rojava and like I would say actually that Star Wars actually resembles more closely the civil war in Syria than it actually does the Second World War because like in Nazi Germany there wasn't a lot of resistance. Like there was resistance, but it didn't really had a lot of influence. Like it was very, very underground, you know? Well, like Rojava has like its own territory that it controls in a way, like it's kind of strongly implied that in Star Wars in the universe, that's also kind of the space because there's battles ongoing, like there's an open conflict going on, you know? Like
Right.
it's not something secret.
Yeah, definitely. But also like obviously like the resistance itself like operated underground, but I wouldn't say that like the resistance in Nazi Germany didn't have like any influence or like very little influence over like they didn't win the war, but they very much like helped protect certain communities from the Nazis like throughout World War II.
Yeah, yeah, I know what
And
you mean. This is
um,
kind of an unfair comparison for me, but I think you know what I mean.
yeah. Um, so also like there's a reference that in the war room scene where Tarkin and
Mhm.
Vader and some other like generals talk about um,
Uh-huh.
that like the Emperor like dissolved like a certain committee where there was like rebel representation. So that obviously also alludes to like how like Nazi Germany like
Well, it
uh,
wasn't just a committee, it was literally the Imperial Senate. That's like
oh shit! I didn't know that. I thought it was just some committee, but
no,
it
no,
was
it's
like
literally Imperial Senate.
okay. So
It's
that
not
obviously
like the
like
party planning committee with Angela being the boss. It's like an actual thing, you know?
yeah. So that obviously also mirrors like the fascist turnover, like how like once like Hitler was in power, it wasn't just like he happened to be in power, but like he actually like like um changed like the politics of the country and like like turn it from a democracy into a dictatorship, basically, right?
Yeah.
Um, so and in that scene, Vader says something like the last like rebel scum representation is like now gone inside the Empire, right?
Hmm.
So since he like alludes to them as rebels, we can like assume that the rebel group are also like kind of the remnants of like basically the Weimar
Parliamentary
Republic,
democracy.
like the Weimar left, right?
Yeah, you
So
could kind of think of them as like Antifa, maybe. Well, okay, like Antifa, like nowadays, is like an anarchist. Yeah, they're anarchists basically. But Antifa, like back in the day, was like tankies. You know that, right? But like the
right,
rebels are not like tankies. Like
I
no.
wouldn't say that. Yeah, well, actually, like we don't know if they're like libertarian or authoritarian. They're mostly like in the story. What is relevant is that they're like anti-fascist, right?
Yeah.
Um, so we could like do comparisons with like the rebel army and like the KPD and like the Antifa resistance because like I think that historical context is like the way like the aesthetics allude to.
Hmm.
So it would make sense to like analyze it in as those sort of terms. Obviously, not everything is going to be correlated on one, right? Like they don't
Yeah.
have any like there's no person in Star Wars that like to my knowledge like alludes to Stalin or some or like Talman or someone like that, right?
Well, there is
But
someone like analogous to Hitler, and that's the Emperor. And but that's about it. Yeah.
yeah, I guess. Well, I guess like in the story structure, the Emperor. Well, the Emperor doesn't even like appear in this movie, but in this
Yeah,
like
that's one thing I wanted to get to
I
talk about later. Yeah.
what I wanted to say is that like I guess like in the in universe explanation, the Emperor is kind of like analogous to Hitler, right? But like
Hmm.
in the story structure, like our like fascist villain who has like the aesthetics of Hitler is definitely Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Um.
Um,
So
yeah, what I
yeah,
wanted to say is like you said, like they dissolved the committee, which happened to be the Imperial Senate. I still think it's funny that you called it some committee, but yeah, yeah. Like I know a bit like of trivia, like about Star Wars, and I know, for example, um, that the transition between like a democracy and a totalitarian like dictatorship starts at the end of episode 3. Like I'm just gonna assume you've all seen Star Wars because come on, who hasn't seen Star Wars, you know? But how it happens is that first the Senate, the Imperial Senate, gives the Emperor the power. Like they make Palpatine the Emperor, and that's the same way how it happened in Nazi Germany. Like the Reichstag gave away its own power to Hitler, right? Um,
right.
but then after
But
that, there
that's
was
like
like
a separate story, right? Like Palpatine is way more like a focus character, like like a villain in the prequels than in the original trilogy.
well in episode 6 he's kind of relevant.
Yeah. Okay, but like in the context of like this movie, like the one we're
Yeah,
talking about,
yeah,
uh, he doesn't even like appear, and even in episode 5, like the very like obviously focused villain
is Darth Vader.
is Darth Vader, and even in
And
episode 6.
yeah, in episode 5, I think episode 5 focuses on the struggle between Luke and his father, and not so much on the general issue
Yeah,
of the
it's
rebellion. Although the Battle of Hoth is symbolic for the rebels
right,
experiencing setbacks too. I
right.
mean, that's the
So
whole point of the Empire Strikes Back.
yeah, exactly. But it's like, well, maybe we can do some Empire Strikes Back episode in the future. But like, I think the main theme of Empire Strikes Back is like it has like a general backdrop of like the rebels fighting and their setbacks in the war, and
Mhm.
that is like symbolized by like the emotional setbacks that Luke has to face when he finds out Darth Vader is his father, right? Uh,
Yeah. I
but
wanted to say something about the democracy to totalitarian dictatorship
right, pipeline.
transition, though I was cut off by you. But um, so the thing is that it kind of was like the same as in Nazi Germany, and I think it's like a really good analogous. I think it's very good, very analogous in a way, because in Nazi Germany, like at first, like the Reichstag, like the Parliament of Germany, gave Hitler emergency powers. Then he extended these emergency powers through through the Reichstagsbrandverordnung, which was done after the Reichstag fire. And the same thing is kind of done in Star Wars. Like there's like an emergency, and after the emergency, like there's an emergency that is used to warrant giving more power to Palpatine, and then Palpatine abuses these power to funnel even more power into his hands, right? And the thing is, like, but like after that, there's like still like an element of democracy going on the subnational level. Like, for example, in Nazi Germany, when Hitler seized control, like the states of Germany, the Länder of the Weimar Republic, still had like still a considerable amount of power, and it took quite a while to get that off before to get the power off of these subnational parliaments before they could install like a direct hierarchical system with governors that are being overseen by like the Reichsleitung and the Reichsführer, which were then overseen by Hitler himself, you know? And the kind of the same thing happens in Star Wars. Like at first, like the parliamentary like the individual star systems of Star Wars still have like their own autonomy in a way, even though there is an empire. That's why there's still an Imperial Senate, and the and areas like, for example, the Alderaan system can still have like somewhat of an autonomy with like a governor and so on. But the Death Star,
Right.
like the shtick about the Death Star is that now that they have this this weapon, they don't need they don't need like a representation for the states, or like states in quotation marks, like the planetary systems, because they can just rule through fear. And that I think is like a very good analogy that we haven't talked about yet. So
Right, and obviously, like the Death Star can also be like.
I would say the
seen-
Death Star is like the analogous to the SA, the Sturmabteilung.
Well, yeah, but also to like nuclear weapons, right? Like the threat of nuclear weapons is like.
Well, I don't think the nuclear I don't think
Yeah,
that
I know this doesn't fit like 100% with like the Third Reich analogy, right?
Mhm.
But in general, like that is obviously also like the connection you make. Like if you see like a a planet like Alderaan being blown up and like forming like that kind of cloud, like
Mhm.
it's it seems like a nuclear weapon, right? And
Yeah.
that is also like kind of like a big topic in the 20th century, like the sudden like appearance of nuclear weapons was like completely changed like warfare and like the threat of like basically the world ending, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't. I think that's like kind of like interesting, but I think like the Third Reich analogy is more interesting.
Yeah. And what did I want to say? Um Yeah, I think the rule through fear doctrine, I think like the Death Star is like a very good analogy to the SA at first, because during the rise of power, like the SA, like the Sturmabteilung was like really important thing. But after that was over, but after 1934, we all know Ernst Röhm was killed in the Night of Long Knives. And instead of that, the SA was subordinate to the SS, the Schutzstaffel, which was then used to rule through fear. And I think the Death Star is actually a good example of like, even though it's strictly part of the military, I think it still has like a paramilitaristic feel to it, you know?
Right. Do you think that General Tarkin is like supposed to be Ernst Röhm?
I don't think so, to be honest, because like I don't think there's any I don't think so, because I don't think there's like any conflict going on between General Tarkin and the Emperor. Like as far as I know, before the Republic became the Empire, Tarkin was also a high general there, which wasn't, for example, the case for Röhm. While for example, Hitler Hitler was no, never mind. I just had a brain blank out. You go ahead.
Well, the thing is, like, if we do the analogy that the Death Star is like symbolizing this A, then well, like the SA was sort of like destroyed, like and replaced from within the Nazi Party, right?
Yeah.
which is not really true for the Death Star because Luke destroys it. So I don't really know if that analogy like fits like perfectly well. Like I think you said like something smart that you said like the Death Star like symbolizes like rule through fear, right? But I
Mhm.
don't think it like symbolizes like a specific division within Nazi Germany. It just like symbolizes that general like theme, you know, throughout fascism.
Yeah, I know
I
what you
think
mean.
I think that's like a better way to read it because like if we do it like very like specifically, then we
Mhm.
can like see it doesn't really add up, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I know
Um,
what you mean.
right. Um, okay. Uh, do you want to talk about the special edition? Because I know you have a hot take compared to the Star Wars community.
Well, I mean, I kind of appreciate the special edition. Like there are some cancerous things. Like for example, in episode 6, let's not talk about whatever the fuck is going on
Okay,
in
we
that
talk about
bar.
this movie. We're talking about this movie now.
Okay, good. I think like we talked about this while watching the movie, and I think you have a good opinion on this that you said you don't per se have like an issue with the special edition itself, but rather with George Lucas trying to delete everything before that special edition, like making it like the new and only Star Wars, like there's never been anything else. Like I agree with that. I think this should be
Yeah,
available for everything, but in general, like the special effects themselves, I think the majority of them are fine or even appreciated in most cases. I've seen like plenty of comparison videos, and in my opinion, it just looks better. Like I don't think I can really discuss it other than I just prefer it, you know. But
yeah.
I absolutely get your sentiment, and I think we
I
should stop with
I
this
think
circle jerk
there are a
of.
few things that look fine or better
Uh-huh.
for the special edition. I think there are some things that are really weird, like the whole like creatures. They really don't look good, and
There,
they look
like I don't say everything is looking good, but I think in general, it enhances the appearance of the movie. But there
right.
are some really crappy scenes, like for example in episode 6, that weird bar scene with that god awful singing.
Yeah,
And the other thing is the how's it called? And the other thing in episode 4, example, is these weird animals that are walking across the.
yeah, and Mos Eisley.
Yeah, it looks so awful.
There's like this
uh,
one scene where this one animal just walks in front of the screen, and you see like nothing except like an extreme close up of like these really shitty graphics, and and it's so weird because it just blocks the scene. Like in the original, you just see like what is that? It's not a ship. What is the thing called that
the
they
land
write?
scooter, the land
The
scooter,
what?
the
Yeah,
land scooter.
exactly. The like in the original you just see like the land scooter for like 1 second longer, which like okay, it's like but like in and the new one it's just like a few seconds of these this like this animal and it's so close that you can't even make anything out. It adds nothing to the scene but just like horribly distorted and yeah. Well, but the thing is about the special edition, you touched on that. Like, it's
Mhm.
ironic because this movie, as we discussed before, itself is like a collage of like a lot of different sources, and like there's an entire Wikipedia article about like inspirations and
Oh,
resources
it's
for
called
Star
land
Wars.
speeder, not land scooter. Sorry.
All right, you know, so like if there's an entire Wikipedia article full of like sources and inspirations for Star Wars, obviously there's a lot of them, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of ironic that um, like after that, George Lucas suddenly thinks this is all his and kind of like blocks access to like what is already out there and has a lot more fans than the new special edition, right? And
Mhm.
so he just like imposes like his copyright rule law, like on
The
like
sanction sees the means of copyright.
obviously not anymore because he isn't
Control of
in
the business.
control of the copyright anymore. So I'm actually not sure if Disney like has re-released the original, but I assume not. I didn't hear anything about that. Um, but yeah, now it belongs to Disney. So I don't know. I think the world would be better if Star Wars didn't have copyright, and we um, it would just be the property of the fans or whoever wants to watch it.
Yeah, that's what I just said. The fans should seize the means of copyright. But I was kidding. But
Exactly.
actually, yeah. I mean, it's like a thing. Like, we should seize the means of a copyright. Just kidding, haha. Unless that's kind of this thing. Like,
Yeah.
we're not gonna actually do it, but if we would do it, I would be in for it.
Right. Okay.
Another thing I want to touch on is like the which is more of the cinematic aspect of the movie. Like, I absolutely love the special effects of this movie. Like the Star Wars original trilogy, like Star Wars Episode 4 is my favorite movie, period. So I'm just gonna spoiler it. I'm gonna give this movie a 10 out of 10 later, but we're gonna talk about that. But yeah, I just appreciate the way the movie looks because, like, in my opinion, if you use too many computer effects on something, it stops looking real. It just starts looking like it looks perfect. Like, it looks like, for example, I don't know, I'm gay, so that's a bad example, but like if you know like a lady and it has like a lot of makeup, like she has like a lot of makeup on, even though it looks perfect, like something's off. And it's kind of like the same thing with like movies for me. If there's too much computer effects, it just kind of looks off at some point. And yeah, and that's the reason I appreciate Star Wars episodes 4, 5, and 6 so much, is because they use so many practical effects instead of using like computerized effects, because they didn't have the possibility for that in the 70s.
Right. Here's the thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and I wanted to go on and touch on a few on these special effects. Like, for example, the scene where
Wait, can I say something before you go into specifics about like the general special effects?
Okay, go on.
So like I agreed that for Star Wars, and especially for this movie, especially because computer effects weren't that good back then, it really helped that Star Wars used like miniature paintings and map paintings and miniature models, right? And so on. I don't necessarily agree that it's like a general rule. I think like there's there are movies with like a lot of CGI but it works for that movie like more, right? Like I can't say like, oh, there's it's like a general rule there can't be like too much CGI, right? I think it has to be like assessed on a case by case basis. So so for example, like the Matrix has like a lot of CGI. Like it's
yeah, I know, I get your point.
But like the Matrix, for example, like specifically the Matrix is like set in like a digital universe, so it makes like that adds to like the aesthetic of the Matrix. But for Star Wars, it adds to aesthetic to use like that sort of like kind of mechanical like retrofuturist style, right?
Okay, yeah, exactly. Like, you mean like the same thing, like makeup can look like good, for example, like in the context of a drag race, like it's kind of the same analogy, you mean?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird analogy.
Yeah, I just used the makeup analogy earlier, so I'm gonna go with it.
Right.
Okay, let me specify it then. I think in the context of movies that play in space, I think I prefer the look of miniature models over the look of computer animated things, because like if you've ever seen like I'm just gonna assume you've seen at least a picture of the space shuttle. Like it has like these weird plates on it, and it just looks rugged. Like, it doesn't look clean. Like, it looks rugged.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
And I think like miniature models bring across that rugged feel a lot better than computer models, because like computer model textures look like smooth, like absolutely smooth, while like rugged textures look like like real textures have like imperfections that you can't just quite recreate. In the context of space movies, I prefer that. For example, I prefer the Star Trek movies that do not come out of the computer.
Right.
Can you say that come out of the computer? Yeah, right.
Okay, like, for Star Trek, I assume you mean like the the J.J. Abrams movies, which are like extremely stylized to be like very shiny and clean, right? So
Well, I would actually, now that I think about it, I actually quite like how the J.J. Abrams movies look too.
okay.
Actually,
Here's the thing. I think in certain contexts, this is not a space movie, so maybe this is not like the perfect example.
mhm.
But Mad Max Fury Road is like a movie that is like extremely like, I don't know, like what you said, like not clean, like very like rugged, like the aesthetic is like very like dirty, you know? And
Mhm.
it does use practical effects, but it also uses like a lot of CGI where you like wouldn't expect it. And I think if you do it like well, you can
Mhm.
even do it like with a computer. You can also make like good non-clean aesthetics. You know?
I think it's kind of like the comparison. Okay, you don't play Minecraft nearly as much as I do, but there's like two Minecrafts called Industrial Craft and Immersive Engineering. And if you've ever played these mods, it's kind of like a really good comparison because like Immersive Engineering really has like the same look to it. Well, of course it looks like Minecraft, but it has like that same rugged feel to it that like miniature models have to it, while Industrial Craft, while looking sleek and modern, has like more of that, that CGI look to it. And I think
Yeah.
that's like a very fitting comparison, like how these, like if you know these mods good for you, because then you know what I'm playing. Like the one has like that rustic feel to it, while the other one has like that high tech feel to it. And
Right.
I prefer that star, and I prefer, like in space, I actually prefer the rustic feel, because I would say like in space nobody would be inclined, like in a realistic setting, like nobody would be inclined to build a smooth ship. Like why would you? You could build a flying potato. There's no air resistance. Why
Right.
would you even care? You know?
Oh,
Um,
also a random movie that I think really achieves the like rusty, dirty space aesthetic really well is Alien. I recently rewatched that movie,
mhm.
and it holds up so well. It's 41 years old right now.
Oh
Like
wow.
there was like a like the anniversary recently, like a week ago or something. So
Oh
I
nice.
watched it for that, and it holds up so well. It's like it's extremely like mechanical, if you've seen it, you would like get it, and I think you would like the aesthetic of it.
Okay. I wanted to get into the actual effects of
Right.
as I wanted to do earlier.
Sorry.
So first of all, like the very first effect that when I told you earlier, you were mind. I remember that is, the effect where like the land speeder goes like across like the desert of Tatooine, and it looks like it's floating.
Right.
You know how that's done? Like
Yeah, you
there's
told me it's like a mirror.
that was like a rhetorical question. You were supposed to say no, so I can explain it.
Okay,
But
but
oh well, we'll
I
keep this
still
one in
don't.
the podcast.
I still have a question because I still don't really understand
Yeah.
um how that is achieved. Like,
There's like a small hill between the camera and the speeder itself, so it covers up like the bottom 2 or 3 pixels where you could actually see the wheel. And then underneath the vehicle, like it's actually a car which has 3 wheels, like a stripped down car. It's built on a car chassis, and there is like that, like it's not really a mirror, it's more like of a foil that goes around it one time. The reason I know that is because there's like an outtake. Like there's like a whole video on the outtakes of Star Wars Episode 4. It's a great video. I recommend you check it out. Um, and one of the outtakes is how like the mirror like breaks off at the front and unravels, and you can see like the innards of the car underneath. So yeah.
yeah, I'm just looking at pictures right now of like the mirror at an angle, so you can like see it more clearly, like reflecting.
It's done really good, right?
Yeah. Now I can like see uh how that works. But that's really impressive.
Another effect is like like the blaster sound would go like choo, 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 right?
Yeah.
And that how they're done is like there's like an antenna somewhere in California, I believe, or is it California? Somewhere in the U.S. there's an antenna, and suspension wires that go off of it to keep like the antenna upright. And obviously they're under a lot of tension because otherwise the antenna would topple over, right?
Right.
And if you take a wrench to that thing and knock on it, it does like the sound, like the choo 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 sound. And if you slow that sound down, you get the blaster sound effect. Another effect
Yeah.
which I think is
This
really
is really
fascinating.
interesting because like it sounds extremely like like electronic, like you would just like
Yeah.
create that a computer program. So that
Or yeah,
I have seen like a video of like the wrench like hitting against the wire.
I
And
saw it earlier. I sent it earlier to you today.
yeah, exactly.
You
And
don't say it like you've seen. You like I saw it. You didn't. I just showed it to you.
and
Mhm.
it looked like it's so weird because like if you see in a movie you just assume um it's just like a digital sound effect, but like to
It's
actually
not.
like see like a thing that in real life makes that sound, it's kind of like a surreal experience.
Yeah. Um, like they're still edited though. Like for example, the blasters slowed down a bit.
Right.
Another sound which I really like is like you know the TIE fighter.
Yeah.
Like when they
The
fly, they
ones.
make that really characteristic sound like that. I don't want to make it now because it's just sound weird, but
Yeah, yeah.
um, like that
Stage
weird
effect.
screaming sound effect. You could almost say like it almost sounds like a scream in a weird way, like a contorted scream. And
Yeah.
that sound effect is actually elephants. Like it's yeah, I don't know how the flip comes around, but it happens apparently because it's an elephant. Um, and yeah, and another effect I really like is the one that's the visual one though, where Obi-Wan is on that weird platform behind that machine where the stormtroopers don't see him and he turns off like the tractor beam, you know?
Hmm.
Like that thing is like only like the tractor beam itself and like the platform is like an actual set where people can walk on, and the rest about it is just a matte painting directly in front of the camera. It's so weird. Like I can't make my brain believe it. Like my brain just still goes, nope, that's the Death Star, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. The thing is, you don't only have to like paint a good painting, but you also have to like place it in such a way that the perspective like looks completely natural,
Yeah,
right? So that is really impressive.
yeah,
Do,
it's
do you
really good.
know who like did this the sound design and like the paintings?
Mm-hmm.
Who?
Who? Sorry, I was.
Wait, do you like know the names of like the people who did the paintings or the sound design?
It was Industrial Light and Magic, but I don't
Yeah,
know
yeah,
the
I
people
know.
themselves. Sorry.
Yeah, okay. Um, yeah, so okay, there's one I think structural flaw in this movie. Or I
Hmm.
don't know, I don't really know if it's like a structural flaw, but it's kind of like a storytelling flaw, I think. Um, you told me that originally there was a different edit where in the beginning there was like a lot more like not backstory but like exposition of Luke Skywalker's like day-to-day life, on Tatooine.
Yeah.
So obviously it seems because it was like intercut with the original scene with Leia and the droids. It
Hmm.
seems like it was a good choice to remove that because that would have slowed the scene down. But
Yeah.
taking that out doesn't only like result in a like kind of confusing moment later on, but also I feel like the theme that it's not really a theme, but we are told that Luke Skywalker is like a pilot, right? And in the end, uh, obviously, like his big scene is him piloting an X-wing, right?
Hmm.
Um, but that's like a payoff without any setup. Like I feel like with this edited out, it seems like kind of like random that Luke Skywalker like happens to be a pilot, and we like in the early parts of the movie, we never see him like flying anything or doing anything like pilot related, except like playing with the airplane, which I don't know. I don't think it's obvious to like insinuate that he's a pilot, right? So I think I don't no, I wouldn't have like left that in the original edit as it is, but I feel still it creates not confusion, but like the payoff, like it and expects a payoff, but like you usually have to like set a payoff up before you like pay it off, right?
Yeah, I know.
So I think like they should have like developed the piloting theme. I have no like concrete suggestions how they would have managed that, but like I think they should have focused on that like a bit more. Like at least like mention it more, that like it's like maybe like in the very beginning.
I mean,
Like,
it was mentioned, but it was thrown out of the original cut because the original cut was
right, like so here's like maybe like a suggestion. You know how like he buys the droids from
Mhm.
Sand People? Why not just like have a scene where he like flies to that place? Like I know that like in the movie it's like very close, but they could have just like changed the location of like the Sand People selling the droids, right? And have
Yeah.
like an extra shot of him like flying like not a ship but like a small like plane towards that scene. Then you can like at least establish that he like knows flying and like you have like a kind of a setup for him being a pilot.
Yeah.
All right. What else? Do we want to talk like about the philosophy of the Force?
We can do that, yeah.
So I like the Force. I think it's kind of cool. Um, I like the Force in this trilogy and also in The Last Jedi. Actually, I like it in The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi is like the movie that focuses the most on the Force and
Yeah.
Empire, right? These two movies.
Yeah.
Because Empire also has Yoda and so on. And but yeah, so here like the Force is like sort of way more mythical than like the midichlorian thing and the prequels. It's I don't know. I like that. I like the explanation that there's like it's sort of a religion, but
Mhm.
it doesn't like believe in a higher power. Like there's no hierarchy to the Force. It's just like the Force
It's
is
almost
like
like a nature religion, like with like I've seen it that in many like indigenous religions, including the before Europeans came to Europe, like us Europeans are originally from the Caucasian Mountains, you know that, right?
right.
Um,
Well,
before we came
actually,
here,
like from beyond the Caucasian Mountains, like India.
no. Indian people and us both came from the Caucasian Mountains, although the Europeans ventured west and the Indians ventured east.
Hmm.
Um, However, before Europeans were in Europe, so like the old Paleo-European people, um, and they also had like nature religions, as far as I know, where they how's it called? They had like nature religions, which are which
They
don't have
believe
like
like
higher
in
power in a way, but rather have like the diffuse deification of everything around them,
right.
like
So
with Mother Nature, like you know the concept of Mother Nature.
yeah, exactly. I don't have like much like reference to like the nature religions of like pre-ancient Europe. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I know like a bit about Shinto, and so Shinto is like the main religion in Japan,
Mm-hmm.
and they believe in kami, which are like nature spirits, and like every natural entity has like a spirit. So like every mountain, every lake, every river, but also like rock. So like there's like big things that have like very strong spirits, and like small things that have like more smaller like immediate spirits, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that also like it has like a similar concept, right? It's like more specific than the Force, because the Force is just like a general thing. It doesn't like say oh, this rock has like its own force or something like that, right? But
Yeah.
the main concept is like everything around you sort of is holy, right? And everything around you has like a magical force inside. And so I feel this might be like me talking about out of my ass, right? But
Yeah.
I feel that since George Lucas like came grew up like sort of in the hippie generation, the force could also symbolize like the sort of like higher consciousness like power that you like feel through psychedelic experiences, and like learning the force is like allegory for like drug trips and like attaining that knowledge.
That's like a really intricate euphemism for taking out doing
Yeah,
LSD. I know what you mean though.
it's true
a
though.
very intricate euphemism.
It's true though, because like that's like
I
one
mean,
of the
I've never tripped. I've never tripped, so I don't know.
so one of the well, I can't confirm nor deny, but like one of the one of the main
You
effects
put
is
your
like
foot in your mouth, Jannik.
so one of the main effects is that like everything has sort of like a more inherent beauty, like one of the more mental effects, like everything has sort of like a more inherent beauty to it.
Mhm.
So like things that you would normally like just not disregard but like take for granted have like very profound meaning to you, right?
Mhm.
So that's kind of like the force, right? Because like the force was always there, but before what do you call it? Force sensitive is the official term, right? For people
Yeah.
who can like use the force, right? So before Luke was force sensitive, he like didn't realize the force. He like took the things around him for granted, and then like after he like learned through Obi-Wan to like feel the force, he has more like control
Mhm.
over like his surroundings, but also like I feel like a newfound appreciation of like just like things, you know?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So I don't know. This is like I don't know if this is like an intended reading, but since I mean George Lucas is a boomer, this might as well be like an intended reading because, or at least like an influence that um I don't know. George Lucas probably tripped in his youth, right? So he probably has seen some enlightening shit, man, and maybe that
That's
influenced
a
him
bold
to.
claim. That's a bold claim.
That's not that bold. There, like, it was a very like popular substance to like take back then. So maybe
That whole discussion over the last 5 minutes where we just talked about the unintended psychedelic consequences or interpretation of this movie. Well, that was quite something, you know?
but the thing is, this is like this. I feel like this could very look. Imagine you're George Lucas. You trip
Yeah.
balls, and then you like write a movie. Like obviously, not everything in that movie is like based on his trippy experiences, but like he probably took some of that like with him. Like if you like it, once you trip, like you have like things like thoughts that like you have like found a new appreciation for things, right? So it's very like I wouldn't say like extremely likely, but it's very plausible that that influenced like his definition and like his portrayal of the force in Star Wars,
Yeah.
but not Buddhism, because like on the Wikipedia article, it like lists a bunch of religions
And then
that
it
influenced.
explicitly states not Buddhism.
Yeah, it says like Zoroastrianism,
Like it says like the most
like
obscure shit that's not
Confucianism,
Buddhism.
like even other religions that I haven't even heard, and then it says, but not Buddhism. So I guess I guess not Buddhism.
I
I don't
mean,
know
kind of
why.
in a way, like I would say the philosophy of the rebellion is kind of Buddhistic in a way. I would say.
Well, I guess. I mean,
Well, they're like Buddhism is like not very hierarchical as a religion, you know?
Right. So Buddhism is not very hierarchical as far as religions go, and Buddhism also like appreciate meditation, which Jedi's do, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe the thing why it says not Buddhism is because like other people have realized that and asked him about it, and he like explicitly like said that didn't influence him. So
Hmm.
I have no idea. Um, yeah, I don't. That's pretty much all I have to say. All the things that I wrote down. Should we like come to a close, or do you still have anything to say?
I'm through. I didn't take any notes whatsoever because I've seen copious amounts of times. So, like, I think we
Right.
all
I
know Star Wars. So,
I wrote like way less notes than usual because like usually I have to like write notes, but then also like write a few notes like what I mean by that, right? So I don't forget. But like
Mhm.
here I could just like write Empire equals Third Reich, and then we like went on like this whole tangent that like lasted like for like 15 minutes, right? Because
Mhm.
we know so much. So I only had to write like the very basics down. So yeah, I only took one page. Um,
Yeah.
so let's go to the conclusion.
All right.
So now it's time for the final portion of our podcast and our conclusions. And I will begin with my conclusions. I think this is a very good movie that aged very well. Like compared to a lot of other 70s movies, I don't really discriminate against older movies, but usually I have to like suspend my disbelief because like I know it's older, so I know like I can like actively blend that out. But for Star Wars, I don't even have to do that. It's immediately like very current, very well made, and that's in part due to the great like special effects and so on. But also, I really enjoy the story. It's very simple. It doesn't it doesn't make me like really think hard like what the story is about. It's very obvious what the story about, but that doesn't mean that it's like dumb or that there's nothing to the story. As we like discussed in this podcast, there's a lot of different themes, and although I think both Empire and The Last Jedi, which is kind of a controversial opinion, are better. This is still like one of the better Star Wars movies. And yeah, it's just it started like a really good franchise, and obviously there were ups and downs along the way with Star Wars, but I still would like consider myself as a pretty big Star Wars fan.
A pretty
I
big
think,
one, actually. Wow. I didn't ever thought about
yeah, like not like an extremely big one. Like I wouldn't like, I don't know. It's not like my favorite film franchise or like my favorite movies in general, right?
it. Hmm.
But generally, yeah, I really like Star Wars. I like the universe. I like the movies. Yeah, I would give this one an 8 out of 10.
All right. As I've already spoiled, this is probably my favorite movie. Like, this is my favorite movie. It's 10 out of 10 for me because it's my favorite movie. The reason for that is probably because I just know it like forever. I know it since third grade. Like most people know Star Wars from like a young age, right? I know it since third grade. My dad is a big Star Wars fan, and at least my dad used to be a big Star Wars fan, so I kind of like inherited it from him. Not only that, I also like how the movie look. I'd like the general structure, and I just think I don't know how to describe it best, but I don't think any other movie quite matches like the feel of watching the movie. Like I prefer the Star Trek fictional universe over the Star Wars fictional universe, but I prefer the movies from Star Wars, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like I
I
think there's a
definitely know
distinction.
what you mean.
What do
Yeah,
you say? Sorry.
I
Okay.
definitely know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, and I just think that Star Wars is looks very good. Like you said, like it looks like you don't have to look it through the it's let's not be too harsh on it kind of glass. Like you can like glasses, you can just look at it directly and says, yeah, it looks good, even for 2020 standards, you know?
Mhm.
And I think this applies, in my opinion, and this applies too. In my opinion, it's the best Star Wars movie. And then Episode 5 and Episode 8 are the second best ones. Like I said, I like you said, it's a controversial opinion, but I also really like Episode 8. We both watched it together, so
Yeah, let's do sometime in the future an episode on episode 8. That
I
will be
love
fun.
Episode 8. It's a really good one. Unfortunately, with Episode 9, they kind of ruined it, but
Yeah, fuck episode 9.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, we
also,
watched it while high, but it kept getting worse the more we think about it.
yeah, in the moment it was like fun.
I remember like what was it, like the windshield wiper
Yeah.
advert? It's not part of the movie, but it was part of the. Let's put it that.
Yeah, but like also the movie itself in the thing itself, like in the experience itself, it was fun. But like I personally, as like a guy who likes movies a lot, I think I there's like two aspects to a movie, right? Sort of. They're very connected, but sometimes they differ. Like the immediate experience you have while watching the movie, and sort of the experience like afterwards, like thinking about the movie. I think those are like they're very connected, right? And in most movies, like when the immediate experience is good, usually also like the afterwards experience is also good, right?
Yeah.
But in Star Wars episode 9, that is sort of different. We got way off track. Let's conclude this episode here.
Yeah, I would think
And
we should do that.
goodbye.
Yeah, goodbye. Hold on. The next movie pick.
Oh yeah, the next movie
So
will be
hold on real quick. This episode is not part of the first I go then he goes. This is a special episode, as we've already said in the beginning.
right. So next episode will be my turn again, or like it would have been my turn like this episode, but since we did the special episode, um, this will be postponed to the next episode, and I will choose 12 Angry Men, one of my favorite movies of all time.
All right, and I'm excited for that one because Jannik and I are very politically interested, and Jannik and I, even though we have like the same general opinion, we have like a different opinion on details. For example, Jannik and I agree. Well, I don't know if we quite disagree, but we don't have the same opinion on like the
Judiciary
judicial system, you know?
All right,
And
let's reserve that discussion for next episode.
exactly.
Let's
I'm
put
really
a hold
interested in that.
Okay,
Right.
goodbye, and see you or hear you next time.
All right, goodbye.